I saw wasn't human.
Oh my God!
It was very tall. What's more, it saw me. This thing.
Rawhead Rex.
This podcast is not safe for work and will feature movie spoilers. It will feature scenes described of a graphic nature. It will contain language which most listeners may find offensive. Welcome to the podcast Under the Stairs. And welcome back to another instalment of Rawhead Rex in Pieces. Of course, I'm your host, Duncan McLeish, and this is a sub-series of the podcast Under the Stairs where we take beloved classic Rawhead Rex from 1986, we chop up into bite-sized 5-minute reviewable segments. I get podcasters from around the globe to join me to discuss those segments, but because it's podcast Under the Stairs, because my mind is slightly broken, the release order is randomised. So this might be the first episode you're hearing, it could be the very final episode in the series, or it might be somewhere in the middle. On this episode we're discussing minutes 65 through 70 of the movie. At minute 65, Rawhead Rex is ripping a detective out of his car, and at the 70-minute mark, the verger Declan O'Brien is going, God! So it's literally what he does. Joining me on this episode, and I'm just going to say is incredibly giddy because he Babe Ruthed it and called his segment, is one Mr. Doug Tilley. How you doing, Doug?
I'm doing so well, Duncan. I figure that if anyone is just like curious about this series, you know, Rawhead Rex in Pieces, they're like, well, I'm just going to give it a little taste. Where should I jump to in terms of the Rawhead Rex plot? This is it. Minutes, the minutes we're going to be covering here are the ones that you're going to be thinking of first, because I mentioned in our other section, which you may listener have listened to already or not.
No.
I mentioned that the last time I had watched Rawhead Rex was on VHS. I will say the lingering memory of watching it occurred in the segment that we're going to be talking about momentarily. But I'm going to turn things around just for a second on you, Duncan.
I love it when things get turned around.
Because, I mean, we're not going to have an opportunity to have a long conversation about Rawhead Rex as a whole.
That's true.
But at this point, we're deep enough into the movie, as long as listeners are listening in some sort of order, that I think I can ask you kind of a larger question, which is Rawhead Rex, with its clear flaws, and let's be, it's entertaining and we're having a lot of fun with it, but it's clearly flawed. But it's not flawed like Pieces was flawed.
No.
The people involved with it generally were incompetent or incoherent or whatever, and there's something here because it's based on a germ of an idea or real idea by Clive Barker, and you can tell when you watch it that there's like ideas all throughout it that are really interesting. Is it fixable? In like the people who made it with this kind of talent that's involved here, is it fixable, and what's the big things that you would have to change to make it a better movie?
So with the people that are involved, I think is difficult, mostly from an acting point of view. We mentioned on the other recording, I just don't think anyone necessarily behaves like a human. Like in this, the most human character might be Rawhead Rex. But see that, like, cause it's Clive Barker, and Clive Barker's quite a smart dude. See all the commentary on like essentially sacred sites that the church just occupy. Like the people have been coming here for millennia, so we'll just build our church here, and that it's an easier sell. No, what we'll do is just tell them that their god's changed. I love that idea. I also love the idea of Rawhead Rex himself being that kind of component locked away, presumably by the church, maybe, and because there's church records. So like all that stuff is really, really, really cool. The difficulty is tone. And I think this is more a 1986 problem than it is necessarily a movie problem. I think even by then, the effects being the way they were, the way movies were distributed and churned out, and the kind of markets and the audience they were going for is less serious. I weirdly think you jump back even 4 or 5 years, I think this would have been a much darker movie. And actually even weirder again, like you hold off maybe a decade or so, and then bring it back and see where it lands then. I don't think it's an unfixable movie. I still think someone could come across and make a Rawhead Rex movie now.
Absolutely. I don't know. How about that title, though? Do you think that is something that is the lightness or jokiness is kind of built into the title to a certain extent?
Well, the thing about it is, and I was speaking about this last night on one of the recordings, so it's either out there or about to happen, that
sure.
The concept of entity called Rawhead must be grounded in some sort of real folklore, because my granddad, my granddad, when I was like fucking 5, my granddad used to tell me stories, like ghost stories, of a character called Rawhead and another one called Bloody Bones, and they were, because that's how you treat a 5-year-old child, you terrify the fuck out of him. And he would like silly ghost stories and all the rest.
So I just think it's like, oh, and he's a skeleton made of bones, and you're like, whatever. They were covered in blood.
This is why I've got insomnia now as an adult. Like, that's stuck with me. The bones bleed, son, they bleed. But like, so I'm thinking there must be, and like Clive Barker being the way he is, I think he's probably just adapted some sort of like folk town sort of ghost story of the idea of Rawhead, and the Rex has been put on it because of his supreme size. Maybe
it feels a little though like, you know how the name Pinhead for the character in Hellraiser is a name that's just been kind of added on. Yeah, right. But if you called that movie Pinhead instead of Hellraiser, people would have a much harder time. I mean, I think we've kind of accepted when we think Pinhead that it has like 2 meanings outside of like your uncle calling you a pinhead or something like that, and then the character. But I mean, that would have been a hard sell in 1987, 88.
Yeah, well, that's the other thing. Like, Clive Barker obviously doesn't like Rawhead Rex. He really doesn't like the idea of the character named Pinhead. He fucking hates it.
I know. That's why when I was watching this, my memory was like, oh, it's almost like that. Maybe it's just like a name that the character, the creature, has been sort of referred to by somebody, obviously more explicitly since it's in the title. But then, like in the final half hour or so, the priest goes, Rawhead. So that's his name. It's like Mr. Rawhead.
Yeah, man. Like, hi, Mr. Rawhead. You want to?
I guess it's like Rex, so it's like King Rawhead, right?
I think so. I'm assuming. So. The thing about it is, I think that the story itself, that the subject matter is not exactly the one. And I mentioned this in our other recording, that lends itself in my mind to being something that should be adapted for film, right? Like straight away, especially in this time period, right? Yeah. It just feels like a weird choice. And like you say, compared to PCs, this is a coherent movie. like there are arcs here, like proper arcs. Granted, some of them are a bit silly. The acting is better in this movie in a lot of parts, maybe less so in other parts. And some of the dialogue gets that, like, you get the Barker like prose, but you don't get the intent behind it. So a lot of the commentary on God itself, the church, and even the kind of Irish society, the way it is, this kind of backwoods society, especially from the police who are very. They're very quick to voice that this is like a small town problem. You know what I mean? Like they've probably never seen a murder before. This is why they're behaving. There's a bit later on where one of the inspectors comes in and says, yeah, she's suffering from, I think they call it trauma. And I'm like, Yes, like yes, she is suffering. She ran with a hand still in her hand, like not the rest of her man. Yes, she's suffering from this thing we call trauma. And there's that sort of stuff kind of like it makes me smile. But all the dialogue specifically about in the hands of an actor who isn't as marvelous as the Verger in this, some of that dialogue in a more kind of whispered tone with a more kind of malicious intent. It's really fucking good, but it's the fact it's coming out of a man who is like he's like
that's it. I mean, I think that's the key. Like even more than the creature suit, which I know people point to all the time. I think it's the tone that is the problem.
It's all
right. Everyone's been asked to like just like they're and the fact that most of the dialogue is ADR. I think that's a big problem as well. But yeah, it's just tonally, it feels like this. Like you said, if this movie was made even late 90s, I think you would have, but also maybe like early 70s, even though the book didn't even exist, like a time period where you either show a lot of restraint or you go all out, but this movie fits somewhere in the middle.
Yeah, I think as well, there's it boggles my, I think there must be something out there where they've leaned into this. All it keeps going through my head is Father Ted. Right.
I mean, I thought about it nonstop watching this fucking movie.
And I'm just like, is that right? Because obviously the director isn't Irish, right? So I'm wondering if that's just a stereotype that's in his head, and he's like, they must all be like this. Like, and this, as a result, it's just like kind of this wash across every character where they need to be loud, shouty, belligerent, and you know, like if that's just like a paintbrush, like an Instagram filter that he's just put on every character, I don't know. But then,
well, Father Ted didn't exist in 1986.
Well, this is what I mean. Like, I wonder if there's a part of the satire of Father Ted is the fact that that's how people perceive Irish people. Like, I don't know if Father Ted.
I mean, I hate to also say this, Duncan. Maybe it's just how Irish people are.
The truth is stranger than fiction, Duncan. So yeah, I think that weirdly of some of the ones that are out there that, you know, are like Clive Barker works that could be remade, I think Rawhead Rex is probably the easiest one to remake. I don't think you would have that much difficulty in actually making a very sinister retelling of this. But I also don't think there's any fucking money in that. I think it would instantly upset anyone that has a fondness for Rawhead Rex. I don't think Clive Barker wants it. And I also just don't think there's necessarily a good audience for this sort of movie. So I think that to me though, like I say, I grew up with it, so a lot of its goofiness makes me smile, because I do think, and you hear interviews with the director, I think he thought he was making something. Like it's the PC scenario again. I think when he was making this movie, he thought he was making a great horror movie. And it's an entertaining horror movie. It's not a great horror movie.
There's also a uniqueness to it, right? The very fact that it is in Ireland, the very fact that there's, this fish out of water thing with the American family within it, it lends something, almost like a folk horror, feeling to it, which is why I was saying early 70s might have been a time to do something like this. But it's just that it also is in the midst of 80s special effects excess. And that's a weird melding of things. I mean, the fact that, again, I'm jumping way ahead, but the fact that the resolution to this involves that kind of fertility idol thing, it feels like it comes so out of nowhere for all sorts of reasons. It makes a lot more sense in the story, I'm sure, because of Rawhead Rex's, looking like a dick. But here, it's just like, his wife is doing what now? What? The very fact that she is even involved in the ending after really having no character up to that point. Anyway, I'm not allowed to talk about that. Let's talk about what we're allowed to talk about.
Well, let's talk about it. So Rawhead Rex rips a detective out of a car.
I'm starting to like this Rawhead Rex guy, I gotta say.
What I love about this is the guy that's driving the car is the worst driver ever, because seconds before this Seconds before this, we had to sit through the most painful 3-point turn I've ever seen on camera. It was absolutely awful. And then, like, instead of I don't know, helping out his superior officer, as soon as he gets trapped in the car by Rawhead Rex, he's like, fuck this. So he starts driving away and instantly hits a bump and overturns the car. Like,
literally seconds later, he's flipped over the car. A police officer. I mean, I guess he's scared. I get it. He just ran into this demon character, but still.
They're supposed to be able to function under high stress. Not this guy, though. This guy can't drive. And also...
Yeah, that's what... When I think about police officers, I think about how calm and reasonable they are in their high-stress situation. He's lucky he didn't fucking shoot his boss.
There's also a part of me that's like... This bump that he went over must have been on the road that he just drove up. So he must have seen it. But he must have had to turn up. It's so fucking stupid, right? But anyway, this scene is dwarfed by the majesty that is Rawhead Rex pinning the detective down and then just staring at him with his cockeyed, glowing red eyes, which apparently hypnotise as well. Like, of course they do. Why wouldn't they? He's just like, and the guy's like, yeah. He doesn't say for you, but it's something like yes, master, or something.
He goes, yes. He does say for you.
It's so.
This is. I mean, again, maybe I'm taking the movie too seriously. I don't like the idea of Rawhead Rex hypnotizing people into following him.
Yeah.
I feel like that's sort of a betrayal of the idea a little bit. He should be appealing in some way, right? If he could just hypnotize anybody, why didn't he start by hypnotizing like dozens of people? Anyway, I'm really breaking down the logic of this.
That's 100% right. Like, why is he killing anyone if he can just hypnotise them? Surely it's easy. If he wants to overthrow the church here, it's just easier to hypnotise all the time.
Sorry, Duncan. Is that what his plan is? I'm actually, now that I think about it, I don't know what his long-term goal is.
What is his modus operandi? I don't know. Like, no one tells you either. It's just that we don't fully know what he is either. Like, is he a pagan deity? I don't know. Who prays to this?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I don't, like, it's just so many, like, weirdness. Like, I think he's of the land. Let's just leave it at that. This is fucking great.
What I'm saying, Duncan, is I think he's been here a long time. He's been here before.
He's been
just like we need a fucking American to tell us that this weird horse demon.
We need someone whose country was only founded 300 years ago to tell us all about everything. I love it earlier on when he tells the priest about like all the the influx of Catholicism in the Romans. He's like that, but obviously that doesn't apply here. As if the Irish didn't know that the Romans didn't make it to Ireland. Thanks, Mr. American. We didn't know that. Feel so much better now that you've educated us. Now be on your way. So, like, this is fucking great. So at the station, police officer Conroy comes in and basically is trying to tell, like, let's try to console David Duke's character here by saying, listen, the inspector, he's going to be here at some point, then he'll listen to you. And Duke's like, oh, no, he needs to listen to me. And he's like, but no, he's going to be here, listen, just chill out. And as he's walking out the door, he says, oh, in the meantime, can I get you a cup of tea? One of my favourite lines. David Duke is like that. Why don't you go and fuck yourself?
You know what's great is that, like, this exchange of, why don't you go fuck yourself? Yeah. Usually that would just be the end of it, but then the guy tries to get the line back. He's like, well, I'll pass that suggestion along. And then he goes, you do that. It's like, which one of these guys are going to get the last word?
Yeah, like, I don't even know who's winning this argument now. It's like, what could have devolved into, like, next time, you better believe in it. It's like that scene from Bring It On. You better bring it. Oh, yeah, I'm going to bring it.
Oh, it's been brought in.
Consider it brung. It's like, what are we doing?
This is a little bit before this scene.
Yeah.
I feel like this movie goes into a really dark place with the murder of the Hallenbeck's son.
Yeah.
Right? And it's, it's not shown in explicit detail, but you see all the blood and stuff like that. The fact that then the family ends up at the police station and, like, they're sad.
Yeah.
But they're not like, like losing their minds in the way that you would lose your mind if your child was murdered in front of you by a giant demon.
Yeah, like Hallenbeck is looking at Polaroids and his wife is shaking the shit out of this child. This child is being rocked so much that like they're going to be seasick when they stand up. You know, it's like, and like, you're right, they don't behave. This is what I mean. There's like, even with the idea of shock or whatever, like no one behaves like a person would behave, and it's
Absolutely.
so bizarre. And he's determined that he's going to solve this mystery, that there's something in the stained glass. It turns out he's right because he's American, and that means he's right, even when he's wrong. And like he's convinced that, but also he's convinced that the people in the town will just know this creature that's been under the ground for 2,000 years. Oh, Rawhead! Oh yeah, owes me a tenner. You know what I mean? It's like, what, it doesn't.
Oh, Rawhead, he's a fine lad. Oh, when he gets to drinking him, he's a little bit difficult. We'll kill a kid and a few police officers.
But that's Rawhead just being Rawhead. Full of character he is.
Oh, don't let him near the church. Oh, he doesn't like the church.
Like he's responsible for the quote-unquote troubles in Ireland. He has some strong views on the church, if you know what I mean.
Rawhead, are you a Protestant or a Catholic?
Never gives his allegiance. He just seems to straddle that thin line. It's so bizarre, but like we're getting to the best bit here. So like we cut
Bono
away.
shows up. He's like, "Listen here, Rawhead.
You've always been my best friend, you."
I'm really letting on everything I know about Ireland right now.
Yeah, but both of us are coming off horribly. So we cut back to the church, and in the rectory, the Reverend is looking at his blistered fingers while consoling himself at looking at a picture of the Lord, which is above the fire, which has given him some level of consolation.
It's a fine picture of Jesus, and I hope nothing bad happens to him.
Yeah, like we could replace it with a picture of Buddy Christ. He's 2 steps away. All he's missing is the thumb out. Meanwhile, the verger, Declan O'Brien, is outside in a graveyard, as priests do. And Rawhead walks up to him. And yeah, that, like, once again, this is the verger's performance is on the verge of being like so over the top. It's completely farcical, but I mean, it's completely farcical, but it's so entertaining. He's like, "You came," and we cut away, and the Reverend's just like, now is time to stand up and, oh, weird noises. Let me go and investigate. He's just like,
this performance is really difficult, right?
Yeah,
because he's kind of a Renfield character.
He is, yes.
And when you're Renfield, you got to go fucking wild, right?
Yes, master.
He's so wild, right? But he kind of both makes the movie and sort of ruins it simultaneously. Yeah. But it all comes together in this sequence right here. Which, by the way, the thing that we've all been dancing around is about to happen, and I cannot be more happy. Which is why I'm trying to slow you down, because I want to savor every second of it.
He wanted to savor every second of it as well, but there's only so much pee to go around.
I know.
Had he known in advance, it would have drank a bigger bottle of water. Like hydrated as much as possible.
Master, were you eating pineapple earlier?
It's just so over it. I love it. So it's just so left field. It's so Clive Barker.
Master, is that asparagus I smell?
This is the one thing that is like. This is the one thing that Barker's like. Yes, I approve of this. Like they got the tone right.
Look, I know I don't have creative control over this, but there's one thing you have to include.
I mean, this might be a tough sell to the studio. Well, the movie's not getting made then. I've got my option to pull my script. Right, we'll do it. We'll shoot it artistically from the back.
Okay, you don't have to make him look like a cock, but...
Barker gets a last laugh. So, like, we've got the Reverend kind of like doting about outside, and he slowly walks up to the graveyard after hearing some weird noises. He catches a glimpse of the verger on his knees in front of a giant fucking monster, and he's like, oh, like, so hides, but continues to take a look for some reason. I would have been out of there. And like the verger rips open the top of his garb, kind of ready
Just
to
like the phrase, I want to see where this is going.
It's like, what is going on here? This is the point where Rawhead just lets loose a gusher of hot fluid right over the Verger, who is like 2 steps away from being like it's one of those scenes in the 90s where like women wash cars and like Sunset Boulevard. It is a slow motion kind of full on ecstasy shot of a man being peed on.
Streams of golden piss splashing all over his pale flesh as he cries out in orgasmic glee. He's enjoying it because this is what he wants more than anything, is for Rawhead Rex to, I mean, they say it later that he's being baptized, right? Yes. And of course, it's a bad guy, so they don't baptize with ridiculously blessed water. Sorry, anyone listening. They bless them with piss. Hey, it makes just as much sense to me.
And I mean, I'm with you on this one. Like, I'm also sure that this is not the only time someone has baptized another person in urine. I'm just saying that has happened before. Maybe in other sorts of films, but it has happened in films before.
You know what? Let's explore this a little bit.
Please.
Which is, okay, you're a priest.
Yep. Just
throwing it out there. You're a priest. You run into a man unbaptized. He's dying. He's going to die right in front of you. There's no water anywhere, right? He's got to be baptized. You need water to do it.
Yep.
You're carrying around a good bit of water right inside you at any moment. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, this to me there isn't anything wrong with the golden shower baptism. It just is being inventive, is what I'm saying.
But how are we doing this though, right? So like a priest can walk over to a body of water, do his cross sign, say I bless you or whatever, and then the water's there.
Right.
Is he doing that over the tip of his cock while it's coming out?
Yeah, certainly.
Right, that's right.
There's no time to spare. Duncan, of course he's doing that. Now, of course, in your mind, you were picturing him somehow erect at the time that this was happening. That's ludicrous.
I would never. I just wondered if that's where the term "the tip of the spear" came from. Like, you know what I mean? Christ's army, this is the tip of the spear. I don't know. All I know is a priest gets peed on, and I'm over the moon with it. Like, the Reverend is so shocked by this that he stands up, walks back, and then both Rawhead, like, you get this a real Shining scene here, like the teddy bear and the guy pop up and look round. They do kind of look at him, and Rawhead decides to run like a Teletubby, which is always funny.
What is Rawhead so upset about, right? I mean, I feel like there is a sense, and this is legitimately how it feels when you're watching it, that he is embarrassed that he has been spotted.
Don't look at me! Don't look at me!
You come here!
You saw nothing.
Because, I mean, his whole plan is, he's just planning on killing people anyway. There's no rush to run over to the guy. But he runs over, his body moving frantically, his head staying completely still.
It's like a fucking weird bobblehead.
I had a question for you, Duncan.
Go for it.
Is Rawhead supposed to have 2 mouths?
Well, he does have an alien mouth in here.
He does. He has a second mouth, and it's it's probably there's the person inside the mask has a prosthetic, but like they make it very clear. They show his mouth open with another mouth inside all the time.
I'm wondering if they make it clear or if it's just that we now have media,
high definition technology.
We have media so clear that we can see the mechanism which is controlling the mouth.
Oh, you know what? That might be it. You know, there's those famous pictures from the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles movie where you can see the person inside the mouth. Yeah, maybe it's either a mechanism or maybe they tried to hide the mechanism with some sort of like weird looking teeth stuff, and it just looks like another mouth.
I think high def has only made this movie better. So Rawhead is just like goes after the Reverend. Gets inside, locks the door as if that's going to stop.
That'll do it.
Yeah, safe now. And right on the phone, there's a great exchange here. So he phones up the police station, and Conroy takes the call, and he's like, "Is that you, Reverend? Where are you? Where are you?" And the Reverend's like, "The church, damn you!" So he's got the church. He's in the church, obviously. Conroy's not a great cop. He's got the Reverend blaspheming as well, which is kind of fun. And he comes off the call, but in the meantime, David Duke's like, church, you say? Cardigan I must put on. So he's getting himself all suited and booted. So Conroy starts, basically starts phoning to get the inspector, who is nowhere to be found, and the Reverend heads into the catacombs of the church.
Right.
Now, I've seen the Borderlands, so I know how this ends. So he goes down into the catacombs, and Rawhead Rex, with what appears to be maybe just a swift karate kick, breaks down the door, and now he's in the rectory, getting ready to wreck it. I don't know why I did that. I hate myself for it.
I mean, it is appropriate, right?
Thank you.
As he comes into the church, by the way, we get a really cool point of view shot of
Yeah.
Rawhead just looking around, and I really like that. It's just I like to get in that Rawhead's head, so to speak.
Mm-hmm.
I do want to say before I miss this point though that in this sequence alone we saw him wreck some cops.
Yep.
We see him piss on a priest, destroy a church. Rawhead is an ally. That's all I'm going to put out there. He even kills a kid.
Yeah, he's living his best life. You know what I mean? At the moment, he's like, this is, I've been locked
He's
up.
like, I go ACAB and APAB, all priests.
he's also thinking to himself, I wonder why it was the locals hid me under a giant stone phallus before. I mean, I don't get it. We're all having a good time. We're not having a good time. Are you not entertained? So meanwhile, Rawhead's just casually being a dick. I love this. He walks up to the priest table and is like, oh, look at all this stuff. Shame if someone pushed it off. Such a dick. And he slowly does it as well. It's such a dick move.
I like to think it's very much like Jesus throwing out the gambling merchants and all that shit, right? He's like, these examples of wealth out of here.
Not in my name. Just tipping over shit. And he's got too many clocks. Why does a priest need so many clocks? We switched out to the catacombs, and we're going to get a bit of a weird exchange here. Let's be honest. The Reverend's walking backwards, and he's grabbed by Declan, who says, "There's no escape." Like this. And the Reverend's like, "Keep your Why the Reverend still thinks he's on his side here is fucking beyond me. This man, like Reverend Oldcoot needs to die. He's like, keep your voice down. He's in the rectory.
Here's something you probably didn't think of, Duncan. Just think about this: how badly this guy smells of piss as he's yelling.
Yeah, he is reeking of demon piss.
And that piss, that's old piss, right? That's been inside him for a while.
Hey, listen, I don't know about this, but it kind of smells like Sex Panther, and they've done studies, 70% of the time it works every time. That doesn't even make sense. Yeah, so...
smells like Bigfoot's dick.
The Reverend's like, keep your voice down. He's in the rectory. He's like, you don't think I don't know? I see what he sees. He wants you. He wants to baptize you.
He wants to baptize you.
And the Reverend surely is thinking to himself, there's absolutely no way he's got enough piss left in him to baptize me. So I'm safe for the next, hour and a half. He's gonna
I guess that's kind of
chug.
well, I mean, it depends, right? Maybe depending on his blood sugar level, he might have to go pretty quickly. But I guess that's why Rawhead was he ran over to. He's like, "Oh shit, you're here too. Okay, here, drink my piss."
I've only got a little drop left. And you know what it's like? It's really difficult to cut off midstream. It's super
no
difficult.
kidding, right? What he needed to do was he needed to have some sort of sexual intercourse previous, so he could go in two different directions. Yeah. Just splash out like a windshield wiper.
Like a sprinkler system. So the Reverend's like, you're out of your mind. And I'm like, clearly, we don't need to say it out loud. And he's like, no, I simply saw the light. And the Reverend says, Declan, you're one of God's teachers. And he's like, God? Ah! And that's literally where we end our sequence. It's a great finishing line.
I mean, that line, the you're one of God's teachers, and his response to it, it's like he's like, okay, this is it. This is the one I'll be remembered for. He fucking throws himself into the crazy laughter. Yeah. I think, now that I mention it, the idea of him, I don't think it's that the performance is up to this point, it feels appropriate for this part of the movie.
Yeah.
but he's like a wacko right from the beginning. Did the Reverend not notice that like his main dude who's hanging around the church all the time?
Knows. Like at the beginning of this movie, he makes everyone sing that hymn again because he's not happy with the hallelujahs. Like the first time David Duke chats to him and then goes upstairs to say, he's like, oh, I'll get Declan to get you the parish records, and he's like, ah yes, the Verger, and straight away he's like that. Actually, maybe we better call you. You're like he knows this guy's on. Like the way I described it before is the Verger in this movie is channeling Jack Nicholson in The Shining.
Yeah.
Like from the first time you meet him, you realize this guy's fucking crazy. It's just we're going to spend a lot of time with him to realize how crazy he can get.
But admittedly, the I don't want to say anything controversial, but people who are filled with the religious spirit, they can be a little off sometimes. It's just, and maybe in a community like this, you just take what you can get to a certain extent.
That's what it is. I think you take.
It's just
whoever the church puts there is who you've got.
Even if he was just a little friendly at the beginning, it would have made the transition a little more.
Like about 3 or 4 seconds after your segment finishes, he turns to the Reverend and says, "Get up the stairs, fuckface."
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's kind of fucking glorious. This question might be the hardest question I have to ask anyone in any of these segments. Do you have a favourite line or segment in this 5 minutes here? There's so many to choose from. There's an obvious one, but there's so many to choose from.
I have difficulty not choosing the "go fuck yourself" line.
Yeah.
But I'm actually going to choose a line that we kind of skipped over a little, which is that when Rawhead appears to Declan O'Brien in the cemetery, he falls to his knees and he's crying and he goes, "You came!" Like, you got my letter.
It's a man crying out for human contact here.
Well, he'll get contact, all right.
Contact was made. To me, I think it's that I'm gonna go with the "why don't you go fuck yourself." I think it is such a this movie you forget because it's so goofy in parts. It does have a tone. And it does do things that does justify an increase in the old censorship rating on this one. It is bloody. There's plenty of people running around on fucking fire in this movie. That's the special effect they got down par on this one. They had a great fire safety person on set because there's so many people just running around in petroleum jelly or whatever it is. I don't think it is petroleum jelly. I think that's what you use for other things.
Speaking of another thing that high definition has maybe changed someone's perspective on, the cop who kind of the second in command. Yeah, he's the one in that scene with the fire. He's the guy who's kind of up front, just deciding whether they're going to shoot at Rawhead or not. Yeah. Once the flames start coming, he becomes a guy in a Beatles wig that's just wandering around on fire.
Oh no, I'm on fire. That's my Beatles impression, which is as good as my Irish impression, which everyone loves. It is a kind of... It is one of those things where, this is to me, I think you hit the nail on the head. If someone was unsure about watching Rawhead Rex, if you just showed them this 5 minutes, they're watching the fucking movie. You know what I mean? You are watching this movie. It's hard to describe how bonkers this is without, out of context. These 5 minutes would even if you didn't like the movie, you would still feel like you gained some valuable experience.
Yeah, well, like I said, watching, I was watching it on VHS in the late 90s, early 2000s, right? And it's not like I wasn't bathed in gory, crazy, wild movies at that point, but even then it stuck in my mind. I'm like, holy shit, even movies right now wouldn't have the balls to be doing that. And it is, it's still something that movies would tiptoe around. They got to be really careful with the religious aspect and stuff like that. I'm not saying there aren't movies that go even further in regards to that, except that this movie was made to be not a generic slasher movie, but a movie that was going to be in theaters that people were going to go see and enjoy, just like a Friday the 13th movie. It's
nuts when you think that's what makes the 80s like such a weird decade, such a great decade, and such a terrible decade, all in the same boat, is that like you literally could get anything made in the 80s. I get the feeling that nothing was off. I think people were just showing up with like post-it notes with just like a name, and they were like, "Yeah, make that movie." It's like that Corman thing where they would ship the poster off before the movie was written.
Or canon, yeah, that's right.
Yeah, and like it's a decade of that, and like I struggle to imagine like how anyone, like even look like what I don't think they were looking at the dailies back then, but I just can't imagine anyone from the studio showing up and seeing the guy in the Rawhead suit and going, "That we're making money," you know.
I think there was a glorious time period where if you kept a budget to a certain level,
yeah,
and you had a wide enough set release that you could pre-sell a movie and basically have made a profit by the time that the movie even gets into theaters. So you could take your eyes off of it. Your producers didn't need to look so much at what's going on. And that did, even though it means that there's a lot of very similar looking movies in a lot of ways, that you could also fit in extra ideas and bizarre sequences like this, because they're like, well, I mean, this must be what the kids like, and you can't have them be exactly the same as the others.
Yeah, I mean, you're not too far away from the Blumhouse model of making movies.
Yeah.
The Blumhouse model basically is, as long as you can keep it, within our budget, and that budget includes a ton of marketing that we're going to do for it. We are none of those movies lose money ever, like, because they've got it down to fine art. The margins are like on the making of the movie are so well organized that by the time it's released, it's guaranteed money. As cynical as it is, Roger Corman was exactly the same. It's a bankable genre. It has always kind of been a bankable genre. As long as you don't spend hundreds of millions at your movie, you will easily make your money back.
That's exactly. I've been reading those canon books, the books about the history of canon, and they're really interesting reads. But you see exactly what happens. The mistake that is such a ridiculous mistake, where it's just like, oh, all of our movies are making money, but we want to be taken seriously, so we need to spend more and more to make more polished movies. And by spending more and more, then suddenly you're not making the profit anymore, and then your low budget movies have to support the higher budget movies, and of course then it all falls to shit.
Oh yeah, like it's a very fine house of cards, and you really can't mess with it. Like once
a Blumhouse of cards.
Yeah, Blumhouse. Yeah, like once you've got that model locked in, you do it. It always surprises me when I hear comments about like people talking about the Blumhouse and all the rest, and the amount of money those movies make, and then the cynical approach to A24. And I'm like, look at how much money A24 movies make. They don't make that much.
No.
Like in comparison, like Blumhouse can churn out like another like The Nun 2, which I don't even know if that is a Blumhouse movie. That movie is going to do hundreds of millions, right? It is, right? Yeah, there was that Talk to Me movie which came out that everyone was going crazy for A24, and they were remarking how great a weekend it had because it had made it was like under 20 million.
Yeah.
And like to them as a studio, that's fucking huge. But to Blumhouse, if it's not making like 80, 90 million in its opening weekend, that's kind of seen as, like even their movies like Happy Death Day 2 made its money back comfortably, but because it didn't make the huge sums that they thought it was gonna, that third movie is unlikely to ever be made.
Right.
Even though it's a profitable movie and all the other stuff is, they have an expectation specifically of low money and this is what we expect to make back, and they usually hit that. And the ones that don't quite get it there just don't happen. So,
and they're not really interested in diminishing returns either, right? You see, a lot of franchises or maybe other production companies that have franchise potential that they'll just run it into the ground. It's like, oh, well, now this one is not profitable, we'll move on to the next one.
Yeah.
With them, maybe what they'll do is, I hate to be cynical about this, and I don't hate Blumhouse. I think they do a lot of great work. But you wait a decade and then you do another Happy Death Day, or you reboot the series or something like that, and see if there's interest there at that point that you can make that big money, thing. I mean, they have a formula, and it obviously fucking works. And to their credit, they give opportunities to people who.
Oh God, yeah, they've done a lot of good work, either getting people releasing their first horror movie, or people coming back who've been away for a while, or just opening the door and giving an opportunity for people in the industry to take a swing at things where other studios won't touch them. Like, I don't doubt for 1 second if John Carpenter tomorrow said, I want to make a horror movie, that Blumhouse wouldn't finance it. I don't think other studios would. So, you know what I mean? That's the difference. Like, they know their genre, and they know roughly what their fans want, and as long as they keep doing what they're doing, they're going to be around for a long, long time. So.
It's amazing that there hasn't been, you know, it doesn't, A24 is a good example, right? But of course, they're just picking subject matter that is interesting, unique.
Yeah.
You know, they're taking big swings, but they have a general idea of the kind of tone that they know that there's an audience for, and budgets that would be supported by those audiences.
100%.
But you think that there'd be even small imprints of the bigger studios that would be like, okay, $30 to $40 million, genre pictures, you know, appealing to a certain subset as high as possible. See if we can grab a wider audience at the same time, because you know, when you watch throughout the year and you see, you know, a random horror movie that's released in the middle of April ends up making $100 million, you're like, well, Jesus, it seems like it. Do we really need another $200 million Netflix movie, right?
There's a certain point where you kind of think that they're not paying attention.
Yeah.
So we'll see how it goes, but yeah, what we're basically saying is give us a Rawhead Rex remake and keep the piss scene in it.
I say add more piss scenes if it's the most memorable part, and it meant that, you know, that's also how these remakes work. It's like, you know what people remember about The Exorcist?
Yes. Oh,
the vomiting scene. How about if everyone's vomiting all the time? so in the Rawhead Rex remake, it's just like it opens, like, you know how you have those CG titles at the beginning, and it's just like CG piss just screaming down the street.
So someone's pissing against the tree, it trickles down and spells out the word Rawhead Rex.
Rawhead Rex is like, it's like, oh, the audience has been baptized. We're all in this together now.
That's a 4DX show, and I want to go where the spray hits you. Amazing.
Finally, a real use for that 4DX experience. It's just every few minutes, it's just spraying a stream of piss right in your face. Or you could do the scratch and sniff, right? The polyester thing. It's just you just scratch piss again and again and again.
Like this is why Hollywood isn't paying attention. You just give us money, Doug, and everything would be sorted. Right, you're a busy guy though, and you were telling me some exciting news on the end of our other recording, so we need to make sure it's out here because this one might drop first. You're out podcasting, but you've returned with a podcast as well.
Yeah, well, you can always find me on Mondays at cinemasmorgasbord.com with podcasts devoted to such diverse topics as the career of Eric Roberts, Jackie Chan, Alejandro Jodorowsky, George Kennedy, et cetera, et cetera. You can find those over at cinemasmorgasbord.com or on Twitter at cinemasmorg, SMORG. That's, again, every Monday. But just recently, after a 3-year hiatus, I, along with my co-host Mo Porn, have brought back the No Budget Nightmares podcast, which is where I got into podcasting back in 2010, I think it was. So I've been doing it for quite a while. We have, even though it's not a ton of episodes, No Budget Nightmares is devoted to micro budget and shot on video cinema. We've done a lot of strange and not as well loved work over the years. And we have just returned with our second episode in as many months. Where at this point it's monthly, but you can find it over at nobudgetpodcast.com, or you can support us over at patreon.com/nobudgetnightmares, all one word.
Phenomenal. Well, ladies and gents, we're going to move on. I don't think any episode's stopping this, so I'm kind of hoping this is the last one. Otherwise, every other episode will pale in comparison. And also, you did manage to set a record. We're at 45 minutes, so well done, Mr. Tilley.
All right, actually, let's talk about some more stuff, because I want this record. I want it to be unbeatable. I want to get so far ahead that
I
people
don't
are
think anyone's, not on this run. No one has beaten 45 minutes of Rawhead Rex. No one. Ladies and gentlemen, we're going to be back with more content real soon. Every day this month, I'm releasing an episode of Podcast Under the Stairs, so spliced amongst the Rawhead Rex stuff, there's tons of other content out there. So it'll either be Rawhead Rex tomorrow or something else. So what I'm basically saying to you is, I'll speak to you next time.